Recently, I've had Death Note on the mind, and being one of my favorite series, I figured it would be interesting to share my ruminations on here. Since nothing else is happening, Death Note is a story about a person who gains the ability to kill anyone at will by only knowing their name and face, and the mind games he plays with the people trying to stop him from using said power. It's not a story concerned too much with personal drama, instead it focuses on playing around and exploring that central concept. What would someone do with a weapon like the Death Note that's capable of killing like this so easily and anonymously? How would they use it, why would they use it, and what would a world affected by its presence be like? How do you catch someone with a godlike weapon? Of course, to explore this, the series gives the Death Note to Light Yagami, who wishes to use the note to make a better world by eliminating evildoers, broadcasting his will to the public under the pseudonym Kira, which quickly descends into a fascist rampage. Crime goes down, but of course everyone who opposes Light is taken out too, for the greater good? It would have been super easy to make this character some kind of put-upon social reject who uses the note out of revenge for a life of mistreatment. But instead, the note is found by someone who has everything: smart, handsome, popular, a loving family, a bright future, and yet the power of the note corrupts him anyway. And I'd say that's a darker, more interesting look at human nature than if, say, the note had been found by some stereotypical dweeb with a nihilistic grudge against bullies or people in general. Because, I guess it's likely that some outcast like that would use his powers to kill. Instead, here, the idea is presented that it's just as likely that someone who wants for nothing and who at their core has basic well-intentioned ideals like most of us would end up using this secret power for something like Light does. This is hammered home even further during the second third of the series, where Light loses his memory of the Death Note and starts working with an anti-Death Note task force where he's legit gung-ho about catching the new user. Of course, wouldn't we all be just as inclined to help catch someone wielding the power of a death god and stop them? That power can't be safe in anyone's hands, right? But what if you had the power to use something like that? A weapon of death without consequence. Would it be as easy to put it down, or would it be impossible not to pass judgment? There are bad people out there in the world, right? I'm sure for some, maybe it would be easy not to use it, but I think others might be kidding themselves to think they wouldn't. Even if in any other circumstance they would fight to stop its use and never consider implementing its power themselves. This is the irony with Light in this chapter of the story, because of course that's exactly what happened with him. It's inconceivable to him that he would go ahead and strike down people with the note at this stage without his memory, but as we all know, he absolutely would and did. This is a version of Light who knows the power exists but doesn't have it himself, and therefore doesn't think he'd use it. Perhaps just like many in the audience.
前のキラは殺意のなかったもの、誤って人を殺してしまったもの、情状酌量の余地のあるものに対しては極力裁きを下していない。前のキラの裁きの基準、僕の考えに恐ろしく近い。何を考えているんだ僕は。僕はキラではない。キラを自分に重ねて考えるなんてどうかしている。
People are quick to moralize and point fingers at those who commit wrongdoings and take the high ground, especially now in the age of the internet when it's so easy to do. They're bad and I'm righteous, and there's no way I'd ever be put in a position or be tempted to do something wrong. I'm a good guy, right? But circumstance can lead the people we assume to be normal, moral individuals to commit dastardly acts. That potential is in a lot of people who claim to be righteous. And that's what makes this section kind of so melancholic and sad. Seeing someone who ultimately in the right circumstances could have had a lot of potential to do a lot of good, cave to becoming a rampant executioner. Light, of course, isn't a completely quote-unquote normal dude. There's a certain dark sociopathy that's present in him that probably a lot of outwardly normal people we meet day to day have within them too. One of the best moments in the series is when that's laid bare to him by his arch-rival, the Detective L, after Light regains his memories of the Death Note.
生まれてから一度でも本当のことを言ったことがあるんですか?
He sees completely through Light's acts of normalcy. I love how Death Note is constantly looking into the depths of the human soul like this. There's a lot you can take away from this scene. I don't think L is just speaking to Light here, even though this is very applicable to him. It's something we're all probably guilty of to some degree. No matter how innocent our intentions and what we attempt to achieve as individuals, we all hide behind lies and deceit to maintain our cover in day-to-day society. Whether it be white lies, pleasantries, just trying to fit in. And it's in those lies and deceit, that speck of sociopathy we all have lies. The part of our soul where the ability to become like Yagami, a person who uses something like the Death Note perhaps can be found. Remember, the righteous detective L isn't the protagonist of this story, it's Light Yagami. He's the one positioned as the relatable main, and I think this is the kind of stuff Death Note is trying to communicate to its audience by doing that. The story could have been entirely about L, about someone trying to stop a murderer who has the power to kill whoever he wants, but that's not what Death Note does. It's funny that Light, the mass murderer of the story, is presented as the ordinary normal member of society, and yet he's the bloodthirsty would-be world cleanser. It's actually L, the socially awkward weirdo who is cast as the one to stop the killing. Someone who self-admittedly has never really had friends, or as far as we can infer as a result, experienced much in the way of love. Somewhat interesting how that character, the one with less experience with people, is the one who wants to stop the murder, who values the life. And isn't that a dark, twisted look at humanity? The way the story of Death Note looks at society, the more you're in it, close to it, invested in its progress, the more you're susceptible to power and the temptation to snuff life out. It's curious that at the start of the series, Light is on some level bored. Getting the ultimate power to kill is entertaining for him. Ryuk, the god of death who gives him this power though, who is immortal and has probably had his abilities for a long time, is also bored. He has no goal or long-term plan other than entertaining himself by seeing the book used by a human. That's how bored he is. He simply wishes to see someone else mess with this power. Is Ryuk a glance of what a Death Note user will become, so numb to death, so much more powerful than others that all real ideals and goals just go out the window? Destined to become this bored super entity? Just floating around looking for something fun to experience. Death Note intertwines questions like this within a cat and mouse narrative, playing all the different tricks Light uses to evade captivity against the traps his pursuers keep trying to catch him with. It uses that framework to explore how far the concept of the Death Note can be taken, so one thing it kind of had to tackle was what a world where Light won would look like. A lot of people don't enjoy the last third of Death Note, a segment that takes place after a 5-year time skip in which Light's powers have become the norm. Crime is at an all-time low, he has a lot of public support, worshippers and TV personalities come out to rep him. It's a dark reality where a lot of society does come to accept the mass murderer. I see the importance of this section of Death Note, and even though it now lacks the interplay between L and Light trying to outdo each other from the earlier half, I think it's a cool mix-up to have a new genius detective come in who has to pick up L's pieces, working off what he figured out, and try to connect the dots of the circumstances that occurred in the first half of the story, which of course we as an audience are intimately familiar with. There's also a second detective now who uses illegal means and teams up with criminals in his attempt to defeat Kira. This section of the story also plays host to some great moments, like when Light's father, another detective on the task force, wields the Death Note but never actually uses it right before dying. It's a tragic, somber, macabre moment, and I'll let Ryuk himself explain the twisted poetry of it all.
ノートを使った人間は不幸になるか。まあ、宗一郎は使ったわけじゃないし、息子がキラじゃないと信じていけただけでも幸せか。
And of course, even people who don't like the last third of Death Note all admit the final episode is amazing. Here, Light's moves finally catch up with him and his delusions of grandeur are laid bare.
神になろうなどと勘違いしているクレイジーな大量殺人犯。ただそれだけの。
Light spent all this time working alone, trusting nobody, eliminating those close to him when he needed to. Not only does that get him caught, but ironically it's only when the two new sociopathic detectives put aside their ego and thirst to win the quote-unquote game and work together to form a plan that they beat him, something that the megalomaniacal Light doesn't conceive to do. Ultimately, it's the noble yet weak-willed Matsuda who loses it when he discovers Light is behind everything. He served a lot of the time as comic relief, but was probably actually one of the most righteous people in the series. And this revelation completely collapses his world. In reality, he was more Detective Yagami's son than Light ever was, a reflection of his ideals, and in the end, even he can't kill for revenge. Despite all this, Death Note is, a lot of the time, surprisingly neutral when it comes to explicitly saying who's right and wrong when it comes to the Death Note. And for a character like Ryuk, it never really was about that anyway. He, like the audience, just wanted to be entertained by Light, see how far he could take it watching the game unfold. But once Light is caught, Ryuk ends it. Just like the viewer, he's had his fun and everything that could have been seen in this scenario has been. Him and us have seen the inner workings of humanity and morality. We gained our insight, and we gained our entertainment.
やっぱり人間って面白い。
Thanks for watching. I hope me speculating about the human psyche via Death Note and talking about everyone's inner darkness hasn't made me look too much like an edgy teen philosopher. Just some thoughts I had trying to piece together what one of my favorite shows has to say. Hope you enjoyed this year's video, guys.